Thank you everyone for joining us today or for watching it later. I am the co-founder of Reimagine Futures. Reimagine Futures is a consultancy kind of that aims to help organizations to get to a point where they have a CSR strategy and then look beyond that. And that's also going to be the focus of my session today. I really want to talk to you a little bit more about how can we embed social impact into the DNA of your organization through CSR and other ways. So yeah, to start with, I just wanted to ask myself this question, but also you as well. What is CSR? Well, the traditional definition of CSR, or corporate social responsibility, is that it is a type of international private business self-regulation that aims to contribute to societal goals of a philanthropic, activist, or charitable nature by engaging in or supporting volunteering or ethically oriented practices. And that definition has been around for quite a while. Actually, the whole concept of CSR is not novel at all. It kind of has been around since the 1960s. And this graphic that we have on the right, with people, profit, and planet bubbles all intercepting, and in the middle is that gold, that sweet spot of organizations that are really going deep into CSR, and also known as the triple bottom line as well. So a few things have changed though about CSR since this definition has been set. Nowadays, it is still a self-regulation, but in quite a few places, we're seeing legislation introduced in order to make CSR kind of compulsory legally. So, for example, in India, since 2014, companies are with a certain amount of profit needs to dedicate 2% of that profit to CSR annually. And that is happening in other places as well. And we're seeing not only the legal pressure, but so much public pressure and reputational pressure to do CSR activities. And all those of you who are probably thinking of jobs in CSR, well, you won't struggle to find. The lists are long, and if you look at LinkedIn and type CSR, you'll probably find CSR jobs in all sorts of organizations. And this week you're going to also hear from a lot of organizations that have CSR opportunities available. And yeah, pretty much all of these brands, like all that you see here, they all have some sort of CSR team, CSR strategies, CSR initiatives. And any brand that we can think of that is successful and established on an international level has some sort of activities related to CSR. On what level? I can't tell. I don't know exactly the details behind each brand. But what is often very common is that CSR is perceived as a set of initiatives, set of well-meant good initiatives. They're quite isolated though from what the company actually does, from the core business of the company. And we will look at how can we use that as a good starting base, but then go beyond that. And that's also what I'm most interested in today, CSR and beyond. So to start with, I wanted to share with you a couple of examples of companies that are doing amazing CSR work and really are great leaders, and I highly recommend their approach to CSR. So we have Ben & Jerry's to start with. Ben & Jerry's is a leading ice cream brand. I'm sure it can be found in the freezers of many of you watching today. Ben & Jerry's is also a leading BCorp. And we'll talk a little bit about BCorps as well. BCorp is an accreditation, an assessment basically of the social and environmental sustainability work of a company. And it's a movement now. It's a big movement of companies all around the world. Some of Ben & Jerry's CSR work is channeled through their foundation. So their foundation engages employees in philanthropy and social change work in order to give back to the local community and to support local grassroots activism and community organizing for social and environmental justice around the US. One of the projects that Ben & Jerry's Foundation supports is together with the Vermont Community Action Teams, they're also called CATs. They on a monthly basis, they make small grants, usually under $2,000, to local non-for-profits and local activist organizations. That is really to support that bubbling local ecosystem of change makers. That's just one initiative that the Ben & Jerry's Foundation supports. As a whole, Ben & Jerry's is a very sustainable brand, so they source all of their material, or all of the ingredients that go into the ice creams from sustainable, locally sourced farms. They have high standards for social sustainability. In a way, how do they treat employees and other stakeholders in and around the business. The other example of a very interesting CSR strategy is by Lego. I'm sure you all have played with Lego one time or another, or maybe now. You're never too old to play with Lego. Lego is one of the largest toy companies in the world, and it's super interesting in the way it's structured. So the Lego company, or the Lego group, is actually owned by the Lego Foundation, not the other way around. So that's a very uncommon governance structure. So 25% of the Lego company is owned by the Lego Foundation, and that automatically means that the business decisions in the Lego group are made differently. It also means that the investment into CSR work is disproportionately big compared to other companies. Now, the Lego group basically is accountable to the Lego Foundation, that every business decision that it makes, it also aligns with the foundation's values and vision, which is so interesting. And I found only a few other Scandinavian companies that are organized like that. It's usually the company owns the foundation. And then in terms of the focus of the foundation, it's to support learning through play, and it invests about 120 million euros per year into research and social impact initiatives around learning through play. The Lego Foundation itself has about 100 employees, and then the Lego Group has about 100 plus employees that work in the CSR department. They call it the Social and Environmental Sustainability Department. One example of Lego Foundation, actually it's Lego Group's CSR work is Build the Change program. Build the Change is a social impact program that aims to, it's also a digital platform that aims to first educate children, 6 to 12-year-old children, on the issue of climate change and the different aspects of climate change and how climate change affects different habitats of animals. And then once children watch a few of those videos and kind of understand the context of climate change, they have the opportunity to build a solution, to literally with Lego bricks, build their idea of a solution. Take a picture of that, upload a recording of what the idea is about, and then Lego will collect those ideas, will create some sort of a data bank, which then uses for advocacy purposes and elevates those ideas on much bigger stages where they're able to implement some of those. So some of those ideas include highway bridges for animals to pass across, some amazing it's like solar paneled jackets for polar bears to reflect the sun so that the sun doesn't melt the ice even further, etc. There's some really fun solutions, and this aggregated data can be a very powerful advocacy tool as well. So these are two companies that do amazing work in CSR. And they go a little bit beyond that, and they reap some interesting benefits on that as well. But when we talk about CSR and beyond, some keywords come to mind, and these are some of them, just some, probably not exhaustive list. We start thinking about ecosystem. And yeah, companies that are thinking beyond CSR are seeing themselves as part of the ecosystem, not purely their stakeholder ecosystem, but the larger ecosystem of the environment and society around them. They're seeing huge business benefits due to reputational benefits, stakeholder value, the win-win kind of approach that they're really experiencing. There is also an interesting new movement around finance these days called impact investment. And there are more and more impact investors out there that are looking for more than a return on investment, the typical ROI indicator. They're looking for SROI. That's social return on investment. And now this is becoming more and more common in investment pitches. You will hear companies that typically have nothing to do with social impact talking about their SROI. And yeah, of course, there are dangers about this. The danger is that a lot of companies will kind of try to invent SROI indicators for their business. But I see it also as a huge positive, because there is an impetus for CSR activities and also further deeper, really impactful CSR activities coming from the finance world as well. Importantly, doing CSR and diversifying into green business lines and just generally like using social impact within the core of the business builds the resilience of that business. And you will see some examples today of companies that are much more profitable, much more resilient to change thanks to their CSR activities. And I wanted to use this opportunity to actually bring us back to the larger theme this conference is exploring is CSR as a key to sustainability. I would say that actually sustainability has made CSR completely compulsory. You know, we have almost no choice. And this video explains a little bit about the sustainability challenge and why it is important for businesses to realize their role in the sustainability challenge, both in creating it, in causing it, because of depletion of natural resources and increase of consumerism, but also their role into stopping that sustainability kind of catastrophe. And this video uses the funnel metaphor, and you'll see in a second, but like the funnel walls are closing, and it is up to businesses as well as government, as well as individuals, as well as NGOs to act and start to level the walls of that funnel and ultimately open it back again, like act as regenerators of our natural and social ecosystem. So I'm going to play this quick video now. I hope you can hear my sound.
Hi, Alex here. How can we help people understand how important sustainability is in a good and useful way? Well, one of the things I use is a funnel metaphor to illustrate the fact that there is no better time than now to act on sustainability. So let's get drawing. In the previous video about our ecological footprint, we found out that the Earth's capacity to provide what we need is declining. There are fewer forests and fish today than there were 100 years ago, and this affects the ability of the planet to supply what we call ecosystem services, things that are necessary to support life and on which we rely, like climate regulation, water filtration, soil generation, and so on. At the same time, the rate at which we consume resources and generate waste is going up. But that's not all. This is not only about offer and demand. Growing consumer awareness makes consumers expect new behavior from corporations and governments. Governments are changing laws that are getting stricter. Trust between people is declining. Prices are going up. Abuse of power leads to growing inequality around the world, resulting in more social tension. The world's population is growing, etc., etc. All in all, there is more and more pressure on individuals, communities, and businesses. It looks like all these trends are converging, right? And we don't want to see what happens if or when they meet. It is as if we were going forward in a funnel. The pressure is increasing over time, and we have less and less margin to maneuver. So everybody has their own pet issue. Maybe it's an environmental one, save the forest, save the whales, stop climate change. Or maybe the issue is the social one. Deal with the gap between rich and poor, get children off the street, changing public policy, create more jobs, etc. The fact is, all these issues are related to the key issue of sustainability, our capacity to survive and thrive as a race, and they all impact our ability to live, work, and play on planet Earth. There isn't one business or person I know who doesn't feel these pressures one way or another. That's why the funnel metaphor is helpful in explaining why we should act around sustainability. We need to relieve the pressure. There are hundreds of examples of countries and businesses hitting the walls of the funnel. Some recovered, like Nike after poor labor practices in sweatshops were exposed by Greenpeace. Some did not, like the Easter Island civilization that collapsed after destroying their own environment. Some are still trying to recover, such as Greece or the city of Detroit, who are facing bankruptcy. The funnel metaphor also suggests something else. There is no better time to act than now. Waiting only limits our options even more. So when someone asks, how do I help people understand how important sustainability is in a good and useful way? Consider the funnel metaphor. What we need to do is stop the convergence of all those pressures and find a way through, then ideally begin to open the funnel and to create a resilient, fulfilling, and accessible society that can thrive within nature's limits. As usual, here are the key points. Pressure on society, individuals, businesses, and communities increases over time. There is no better time to act than now. The more we wait, the less margin to maneuver. And the funnel metaphor can be useful to help people understand how important sustainability is and that we need to find our way through and ideally open the funnel. So I will bring more videos about how to make sustainability relevant for your audience. So stay tuned and thank you for watching.
So that's the funnel metaphor that I was talking about, and also the impetus that it creates for business and CSR and beyond. And it also makes it basically a necessity in order to future-proof your organization, to create that resilience that we mentioned earlier. So here you can see a little bit of almost a timeline, actually, of how we see business, how we used to see business, where shareholder value was the most important. So we had financial returns is what matters the most. So companies private gains and privatizes gains and externalizes losses. And then you have this picture with the business as the biggest element here, and then environment and society floating a little bit around. And I mean, still today, actually, most businesses function on this premise. In fact, probably 90%. I don't know. I'm making up a number here, but I would say that most businesses are still using the shareholder value model. The next model that we have evolved to these days is what we're talking about mostly here, CSR. And shared value. So CSR and shared value is slightly different, but I would group them here just for the purpose of this discussion. We have shared value here, where business still comes first, and the negative impacts are often not sufficiently internalized or are justified by doing good elsewhere. Then you have the same diagram here as business, environment, and society intercepting in the middle here. And that's the sweet spot that we discussed. Then you have the next evolution, kind of like evolutionary step in the CSR evolution, which is systems value. That's where businesses address societal needs in a holistic way, while not hindering the progress towards a flourishing future. And that's a really interesting change in the model here. We have it's a nested system model. It's not anymore one element is bigger than the other, and everything else is kind of floating around, or each element is equal. No, this one is where it's a nested ecosystem. So the bubble, the external bubble where everything is nested within is the environment. And that's also what the video was talking about. Then we have society nested within that environment. And then only within society, which is nested in the environment, you have the business. And the business is nested in those two layers already. So that's a really important shift of mindset, I guess, of how do we see business, and also how do we see business contribution to organization, to the world. By the way, apologies, I have a little puppy that has been a little bit naughty, and I hope it's not very loud and disturbing you guys. And now I wanted to talk a little bit about this ladder of CSR and sustainability, or whatever I call it. I kind of took some elements of it from the Future Foundation, Future Fit Foundation, and others I just kind of created myself in order to explain, mostly for myself, what is the ladder of companies? Where do they start and where can they go? You know, when we're supporting them improve their contribution to society and to sustainability at large. So I think if we have two axes here, you have legal regulations at the bottom, and then horizontally have societal value. So the first step of the ladder is actually the pre-step of the ladder. It's in the negative a little bit. Is pre-compliance. So this is when organizations are not even complying with legal regulations. This could be around human rights, it could be around labor rights, etc. One example of an organization which was at the pre-compliance stage, not anymore, is Primark. You might remember, well, Primark is a clothing company, very, very cheap clothing you can find there. And you might remember in 2013, there was a big scandal around Primark with their factory collapse in Bangladesh, where over 1,000 people died. And they found that there were so many other violations as well. There was child labor, there was a complete lack of health and safety regulations. There was, they also found out that most of the workers were paid very, very low salaries, like less than $1 per day. It was completely below the compliance stage. So Primark suffered hugely from that, like reputationally and in many other ways in terms of governance, but it managed to recover, just as Nike managed to recover, as mentioned in the video. That's because it started to comply very, very quickly and actually started to introduce CSR, started to climb up that ladder that I'm talking about. So the next stage in the ladder is compliance. Those are organizations who are complying with the regulations. They're not doing anything illegal as such. However, their societal values that they contribute with is probably not that high. We are talking about organizations like Uber here. So as you know, Uber is part of the gig economy. This is quite a controversial space still, because there is a lack of regulation. No one really knows. There's not a single law that says that Uber drivers or other gig economy workers are employed by the company or are freelancers. And that leads to a very big gray zone here that is potentially dangerous, where we might think that the organization is complying to legal regulations, but is it complying to ethical standards, and is it bringing societal value? Then we go into CSR, the next stage in our ladder, next step. CSR organizations that have CSR departments or CSR teams are often completely compliant with legal regulations. They usually have a good, like a reasonably profitable business. Their CSR teams are either independent department or a part of their marketing department, because their initiatives are often, I don't want to say they're greenwashing or whitewashing, not at all. Sometimes they're very well meant and they're very meaningful as well, but they're often isolated from the core of the business. So what I mean is, no matter what the company does, let's say it's an oil company or it's a pharmaceutical company or whatever, it still invests in their CSR budget in building schools, in supporting like the local hospital, etc., which is really necessary. I really don't want to undermine these initiatives. They are very important. But what I want to say is that those CSR initiatives are often unrelated and are isolated, a bunch of isolated initiatives that are unrelated to the very core of the business. So the business continues to do what they do while they also do some good in the CSR department. An example of such company is CocaCola. So Coca-Cola is a huge business. They have also a huge CSR department and a huge CSR contribution. However, their contribution is not exactly related to their core business. So while they continue to be one of the main causes of obesity in the world, and also to use huge amounts of water to produce their beverage. So on average, they use 9 liters of water in order to produce 1 liter of Coca-Cola, which in a world of water scarcity, that's a pretty shocking statistic. And water scarcity is only going to get worse and worse with climate change. We need to maybe look at how Coca-Cola can actually focus their CSR, like brain power and money, into improving the business itself, into making the business itself more sustainable. And that's what they can do if they start climbing up the ladder. So the next step in the ladder is called shared value. Shared value is when you create, when you see business opportunities when you mix kind of CSR and business opportunities and create maybe new lines of business, green lines of business that are completely sustainable and are there to do good in the world. They're basically mini social enterprises within a bigger company. An example of a company that is really making some interesting moves in the shared value step of the ladder is Unilever. Unilever is a big corporation, including many brands, I think over 100 or maybe even close to 200 brands. And within those portfolio of brands, they have a few brands that are green, those green brands that we were talking about. Apologies, my puppy is making a lot of noise. Okay, it stopped. So a green brand of Unilever is, for example, Ben & Jerry's. So Ben & Jerry's is one of Unilever's brands, and it is highly sustainable, as I mentioned earlier, and it is also incredibly profitable. Actually, Unilever's green brands are seeing a much faster growth than its other brands. Then we go up the ladder and we go into the B Corp stage. So B Corps, as I mentioned earlier, are a type of companies that are accredited by the B Corp movement, that have really integrated that social purpose and the purpose to serve all of their stakeholders within the company legal structure even. So there are in a few countries you can officially register as a B Corp. Interesting B Corps, in some of one of the pioneers of the B Corp movement actually is Patagonia. Patagonia is another clothing company, US clothing company that is so sustainable. I love Patagonia because pretty much everything they do, the core of their business is about sustainability. Since the 1985, they have been donating 1% of their profits to conservation and environmental preservation. They have amazing schemes to continue the life of their clothes. So one of their programs is called Worn Wear, and it's supporting customers basically not buy more of Patagonia's clothes, so that they can, it's supporting them to repair their clothes, to recycle them, to reuse them, to donate them, etc. So Patagonia is one of the many B Corp companies around the world. I think B Corp has about 3,000 right now around the world, and it's a growing movement. It's not the only accreditation body, so there is Future Fit accreditation as well, and there are others such movements. But yeah, what is important in this is that it's creating a movement. It's creating a trend that's almost unstoppable. And then finally, what I put on top of my sustainability ladder and CSR and Beyond ladder are social enterprises. So social enterprises are companies that exist to solve a social problem or a social or environmental problem. So their mission is basically to get out of business, to stop the problem so that there is no need for them to be in business, which is a new business model. In some countries, you can be a legally registered social enterprise. For example, in the UK, in Italy, I think in France as well, social enterprises are legal entities. And there's a growing support for social enterprises. There are schools of social enterprises. There are social entrepreneurs movements are big, and they're very community-based as well, which is very interesting. One example of a social enterprise is Too Good To Go. So you might have come across Too Good To Go before. It's an app similar to Uber Eats, similar to Deliveroo, to Food Panda, Glovo, etc. It's a food delivery app. But what is different about Too Good To Go is that its mission is to combat food waste. Therefore, with Too Good To Go, you don't just order food, but you order food that was about to be wasted otherwise, usually after the peak lunch hours and peak dinner hours. So that food that would have been thrown away usually. And Too Good To Go is actually doing really, really well business-wise. And it is challenging its competitors to start also thinking about food waste. And it's really changing. It's changing the way business is done in that industry, which is a very interesting way to to do social good. And social enterprises really have the potential to do that. But I would say all B Corps, all social enterprises, and even companies with a shared value and CSR have the potential to influence the market, influence their competitors, influence their supply chain to change, basically. And that's what's really interesting about this. So at Reimagine Futures, we basically help companies climb this ladder. And not every company wants to be a social enterprise, don't get me wrong, or not every company wants to be a B Corp, but we really want to help organizations go deeper into their social impact mission and really embed it into their DNA, into what the core of their business. And I guess that's my main message for today. So I wonder if you have any question.
Hi, Viliana, thank you very much for that. I love the steps going up to see how a business can develop. But starting off with the questions coming through. So with your example of Lego in the first place, I really love that example, the fact that they were getting people to use Lego, use their own product, to then actually show off their ideas, which then Lego would then try and support. I thought that was a beautiful circle. But a lot of companies might find it really hard to try and associate their products in that kind of way to use in that kind of CSR manner. Where do you think companies can really start embedding CSR into their programs and make it beneficial for them?
Yeah. But by the way, just with the Lego example, I feel like it's good to clarify. Like Lego and all these companies are still not perfect. You know, Lego bricks are still made of plastic predominantly, and I think it's important to know that they're actually working hard to also get that out of the way, and all of their new products are now made out of biodegradable plastic. It's still lasting really long, so you can still pass on your Lego bricks to your grandchildren, but they're slowly working on that sustainable ladder. Where companies can start, well, it really depends on the company, right? Like if you're a pharmaceutical company or if you're an educational company, you really should look at your USP basically as your unique value. Like what is at the core of what you do, and whatever it is, whether this is education or whether this is healing and medicine, you will be able to identify ways to support the world with your unique gift that you have. That's why I find it very one example that's very common is there's big pharmaceutical companies that are often just investing CSR money into funding schools, for example, which of course is very beneficial because we need more schools funded. But what they could really do and have much bigger impact and much more systemic impact is actually fund the research of medicine that is usually underfunded because it is like the poor people's diseases, such as malaria. Actually, medicine for malaria is so underfunded because who are you selling it to afterwards? You know, it's not as successful as diabetes medicine. So that's what I'm saying, is that maybe if you are a pharmaceutical company, you should probably look at what you do best and design your CSR strategy on that unique value that you bring to society.
So that's like moving to the step of shared value in your ladder. So moving on from just doing CSR towards the shared value. It seems like an obvious choice to me. Like I could be completely naive to it, but it seems like every business should really start up with that kind of idea if it brings so much reward. Obviously, it depends on their resources and what they have to offer in the first place. But how do you really kind of start a business with that embedded? So instead of you looking to approach big corporations or established businesses where they might be trying to do something, but maybe it's not really in line, where they could actually do a lot more. So what they're doing is good, but they could do it more. How do you start embedding that in a company which is trying to get to that level? they haven't quite got to that level of means yet.
So like a brand new business, like a startup kind of thing.
In essence, yeah. So small businesses or brand new startups with big aspirations, should we say, how can they utilize CSR to really help go forward?
Yeah, well, I think that's a really nice question, because I often get it. Should we just we can't even stand on our own 2 feet? Like, what are you talking about? We can't help anyone else. So that's it's better to. They often say, "Oh, let's just break even. Let's just get like financially stable, and then we'll think about doing good in the world." Well, I don't think that's the right approach, to be honest. I think you can do good without much resources. I think you can do good by being good. So if you were a startup, start by respecting yourself firstly, and like trying to pay yourself a decent salary, so that you're not I guess you're not doing the respecting yourself is the first thing I would say as a startup, and respecting your teammates as well. If you are really starting, let's say, with a supply chain, so you do have so much more control as a startup on who you choose. You still haven't grown enough to lose the control over your supply chain. Choose the right suppliers. It might be a little bit higher cost, but if you design your business from the start with that in mind, you can have a huge impact. Supply chain and procurement are one of the elements within the organization where you can have the biggest impact. CSR is not just about initiatives that you can I don't know, that are different from your products or that you can show off easily. You can just embed CSR into the practices, like into your supply chain, into your HR, into how you treat yourself and how you treat your team, etc. So that's my advice. I really don't like the people who say, oh, let's just get financially stable and then we'll think about doing social good. Well, you're doing something to do with society every day. And the other thing is that actually by the time, in order to get to that stage, you might actually create more damage that then you need to reverse by doing CSR after. And I think it's no time to waste, basically.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of a really good example of, I think we spoke about it before, PreCompliance, who work with, they're an organization helping to clean up the ocean with all the plastic waste, but they're partnered with Adidas. So Adidas helps support them to clean up the waste. And what they do is they collect all that waste from the ocean, the plastics, give it to Adidas, who then use that product to make new trainers. And then part of that profit from the trainers goes back into that organization to help clean up the ocean. So it's a case of Adidas doing something really good, supporting something which is great, but it's embedded in them because instead of them paying people to produce certain materials, they're supporting an organization who will produce the materials for them. So it kind of creates that circle where it doesn't cost them anything more. If anything, it costs them less, but they're actually doing a great thing for the world at the same time. So it has that kind of, I think they got up to that level of shared value, I suppose.
Exactly. Yeah, and actually, well, that's a good example. But there's so many new startups using recycled plastic as their prime material for their products. Like I actually just bought sneakers from a startup here in Barcelona that are completely made out of recycled materials. So you can look into those practices from day one, and the fashion industry is one industry where this is bubbling right now. There's so many startups that are looking into sustainable sourcing and sustainable products.
Yeah, I see more and more of closed sites now of everything being eco-friendly, everything, which is a good movement to see, because 5 years ago I'd never seen any of it. So it's showing that it really is starting to take off, so it's good. We do have a question here, which is really about an example of, are there countries which kind of show off that they complement CSR and sustainability better than others? So maybe to do with their environments, or let's say first world to third world. Are there ones which seem to show it off a bit better of working together in that combination of CSR and sustainability?
Yeah. I mean, it is a bit difficult to say because, for example, as I mentioned, in India, since 2014, CSR is a legal obligation to profitable companies. Like, I don't know exactly how profitable a company needs to be in order to be legally obliged to dedicate 2% of their budget into CSR activities. However, that's not always working perfectly. As you can imagine, there are a lot of loopholes, and what qualifies as a CSR activity is also a little bit vague. I think it really depends on the level of compliance. So if that line of compliance is set up high, you automatically have companies that have embedded social impact into their DNA more, because they have to really. Scandinavia, as I mentioned, is a good example because the level is so high. So this is especially around environmental sustainability and waste and emissions, etc. The level is really quite high. So a lot of those companies start off by being quite sustainable and therefore with kind of very rich CSR work from the beginning, because they have no other way. But it is hard for me to point to specific places that are doing better in that way. I know, so I now live in Spain, and I'm kind of working more in Southern Europe, and before I used to be based in the UK. And it's certainly less of a concept in Southern Europe. So organizations are, there's at least in that compliance CSR step of the ladder. I would say in the UK, I was finding more organizations that are CSR and beyond. But that's really not an accurate indicator. That's just my feeling, and also Reimagine Futures experience a little bit. What is definitely happening globally is the BCorp movement and those kind of accreditations. It's literally unstoppable. So you have a very fast growing movement around conscious capitalism, and that's really interesting. And what changes it is making, and how it's becoming so popular. It is trendy. It is trendy to be a BCorp. So it's interesting how they're using really marketing as their scaling strategy.
So I suppose we've got a question here which is kind of relating to that in a manner, to see if maybe big companies are using it as image instead of actually really putting that soul into it. We've got a question here which is about, I don't know whether you can answer or not, but we'll find out, is CocaCola and other big companies similar being monitored in poor countries on their CSR programs? So are they being monitored? What I'm kind of getting from the question is, are they being monitored generally as an overall from the HQ, or are they actually getting monitored individual countries they're working in to implement CSR?
I mean, it also very much depends on Coca-Cola's model of how do they work on a regional level, on a local level, regional, global. I don't have the answer to that. Usually CSR initiatives have some sort of a global framework of the company, and they are very much adapted and implemented locally, and that's kind of necessary as well, because you can't prescribe a global solution to a local issue. In terms of monitoring, I wouldn't know. When you do reporting, so you have to do impact reporting. Actually, now in many countries it is compulsory. So in Spain, every company which has more than 800 employees has to do sustainability reporting, and that is global. So within their global reach. So if I imagine that affects Coca-Cola in many ways as well. But as I said, these CSR initiatives are often quite isolated. So they are not exactly related to the core of their business. And Coca-Cola is a particular example there, that there's so many, it's solving a lot of problems with its CSR work, but it's causing so many others with its business, with its core business. So it's an interesting
finding that balance between the two, which I suppose if they all jumped on the actual train, as we say, for CSR, then they would all thrive a bit better. I mean, if they can support certain communities which are relating to their product, then the community support back to them. They can maintain a business. You'll never have the situation which has come popular for some unknown reason of laying off people when you're starting to lose income. Instead, you can try and feed back to people, and hopefully that will give you that circle of sustainability. Well, that's the hope. Just as a final question before we kind of leave things is, why do you think there really is a link between CSR and sustainability? Why is there so much of this connection between the two?
Yeah, well, as I think I mentioned a bit about, like, I think the sustainability challenge that we're all in, every single one of us is in that challenge. It is creating an impetus for CSR. It's creating an impetus for businesses to act together with governments, together with NGOs, and with individuals. And therefore, CSR is key to sustainability, but also for me, it is a feedback loop where the sustainability challenge really requires CSR activities, because we're not going to get out of it unless businesses act as well. But also CSR activities and beyond are really, really key to achieving that level of that sustainability transition that we need to do in that funnel. You know, we need to stop it from closing. If it closes, that's a catastrophe for business including. I can't see the two separate really, and probably we should have spoken even more about sustainability, because it's the same topic almost. Like sustainability and CSR are a part of the same thing, and it's very, very important.
Yeah, I think one example which really comes to mind there is back in the UK with a very popular, of all things, toilet paper manufacturer, Andrex, where they would, for a long time, they're running the campaign that it's for every item you bought, they will plant a new tree, which gives them sustainability to keep producing their product, helps sustainability generally, but obviously is their CSR going back in, so that keeps them going. So it's vital. If they don't do it, then they will eventually, well, you will run out of enough resources. So we need to.
Yeah. And Nikki, you asked me something about a reputation, right? Like if businesses are only doing it for reputation.
Yeah. So some businesses, it just comes across that with the trend of what it is, and as you say, it's becoming trendy and popular. That there are a lot of businesses which seem that it's a tick box, looking at it to be a shared value. Yeah. Yes, there is that happening as well, and it's often known as greenwashing or whitewashing. Greenwashing is when they're talking about a few little nice things, that they planted 5 trees this year, and at the same time they destroyed the whole forest for an oil mine or something like that. That's the kind of greenwashing that sometimes happens. And then whitewashing is, we supported 5 people to start their own businesses while we're exploiting 1,000 people in our factory. That's the kind of thing. I think the media and consumers these days are so much better at identifying these cases, and companies, it's not so easy to get away with greenwashing and whitewashing these days. Of course, it still happens, and I think it's a horrible practice, but we're getting better at that, and I really encourage all of us to be more active into those things. This is, for me, it's almost part of fake news in a way. Like, just as you need to be wary of fake news, you need to also be wary of this kind of news. Always have a think of what is the business's impact on the world compared to that initiative that they're advertising. Yeah, it's important, but at the same time, reputational value of CSR is also very important to drive that
that movement and to really make CSR attractive to companies to adapt.
It's like it's a fine balance. It's like you want to encourage other people to do it. So you want to show off what you kind of do to encourage that, but you don't want it to show it off in a way that you're using it to kind of exploit. So I suppose as long as you're a moralistic company, you're looking at what you're doing to contribute or damage the earth, should we say, and the people around you, and you're trying to rectify either way, then your CSR programs are always going to be intended in the right direction, no matter what. It's good to promote. But if you're not focusing on that side behind the scenes, then maybe it's a case of it's just an advertising scheme, which is what we want to kind of get away from completely, if possible.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think that kind of wraps everything up. I think that's everything kind of covered there. Well, at least to begin with, to start the conversation going, which is what we want everyone to do, is really start this conversation and have it embedded in your mind going forward and as things develop. And I'm sure that you're available for any consultation services to help further for anyone else who requires as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to get in touch.
So thank you very much for your time again, Viliana. You've had other sessions with us before where you can check out previous webinars we've had with Vili and take a look at those, which kind of feeds into this as well with the social impact side. So I definitely recommend going to YouTube and taking a look at that as well. Thank you again for your participation.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Bye.
Bye-bye.